It's Gareth Wheeler, Oliver Platt, and yours truly, Adam Jenkins. This show, of course, presented by our friends at CIBC. Of course, I'm being facetious. There is only one thing we can talk about. There's only one thing on the tip of the tongues of Canadian soccer supporters this morning, yesterday, and probably will be for a little while. And that is the fact that the Canadian women's national team have crashed out, burning out of the World Cup in quite borderline humiliating fashion to the Aussies, losing by 4-0 in a match where all they needed was a draw. You could see it on their faces. All the players that stood in front of cameras and microphones after the game deserve to be commended. Yes, it is part of their job, but no, it is not an easy thing to do. Obviously, Jesse Fleming's words stuck to a lot of people, but let's just start with instant reactions. Oliver Platt, I'll give the first word on this to you. Canada are out.
Can I ask a question for Adam? Can I ask a question for? Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
Great intro. Is this a summit? Is today's show summit worthy?
Yes, we're back.
We had a summit after the Men's World Cup. Or are we going to save the summit for Thursday? What are we doing?
Too many summits these days.
Well, to be fair, we do have Goodnight Australia and New Zealand also on the network, and they're going to do a big debrief as well. So
that's the summit.
We will save the summits for those folks on Goodnight Australia.
Just wanted to clarify.
No, it's an important clarification.
The
semantics are incredibly important. Oliver Platt, in your non-summit take, your takeaways from the 4-0
takes the pressure off. Yeah, look, it's a crushing loss. It's the kind of loss, I think, at a major tournament that leads you to reassess an entire program and can, be a really significant moment, I think, for any team that suffers this kind of defeat at a World Cup, at a major tournament like this. Before we get into the kind of deeper issues that I think, are going to come up in terms of where we're going with Canadian soccer and the women's national team, I just want to talk about the game, though, because I was really surprised by the way they approached the game. I know that you don't want to necessarily go into a game playing for a draw. That's always a very dangerous thing to do. But the reality was that a draw was all they needed to go through here. And I was really surprised for a team that we know is not necessarily the strongest in this aspect. I was surprised by how much they opened up, how much they tried to control the game with the ball, how high the defense was at times, which led to some real problems, obviously, in the first half. It seemed like a very, very risky way to approach that game, and one that is kind of out of character and out of keeping of how Canada normally takes on the better opponents in the world. So that, to me, was a real shock. I think it backfired badly when you look at, obviously, the way the game went. And overall, that match for Canada was just a bit of a mess. And you fear that it's been kind of building towards a match like that over the past couple of years with some of the results we've seen, some of the performances we've seen against the bigger opponents. But you were also expecting that, we've seen it go the other way as well. And Canada play some really strong games against the stronger opponents because, again, of the type of team they are, that is usually defensively solid, tactically very good. So as much as, I don't think it's come as a big shock that Canada has fallen a little bit short of this tournament, because there were some warning signs there. The nature of the way they've gone out and the way they've lost that game was pretty stunning to me, to be honest.
Further to that, Garrett, let's get your follow-up to it. But Ollie, you're exactly right, because let's be real. That could have happened in the Olympics. That type of loss could have happened in the Olympics, but it didn't, because they would hunker down, they would find their bread and butter, and they say, okay, the goal scoring, we'll save that for another cycle. We'll save that for another tournament. So to see them go out and win a gold medal by being defensively perfect, and make no mistake, I don't want to start casting aspersions or blame. The center back combination and the backline in general has not been as good the last 12 months, 18 months since it had been at Tokyo. You were seeing moments like that. She Believes was one of them. Them getting used to Kaylin Sheridan. Kaylin Sheridan, she's growing into this type of goalkeeper that will make the biggest saves, but then also let some go that really shouldn't go. It was very much out of characteristic, but yet not a ton of it should be all that surprising. Gareth, would you agree?
Well, where to begin here? Extremely disappointing. I'm surprised that there isn't more of a hard reaction, like really coming down on this team. From the public in general. I was reading headlines coming off of yesterday saying heartbreak for Canada at the Women's World Cup. This isn't heartbreak. This was a disaster. This was capitulation, a 4-0 loss to a team that didn't even have to play their best player in this game. When you are Olympic champions, I'm sorry, and Olympic champions less than 2 years ago, the bar gets raised. And I understand their form going into the tournament and some of the obstacles that they had to face, but you are Olympic champions and you failed to show up in this tournament. 3 poor games played. But the worst was the last one. Australia was always going to be difficult playing them at home, even though there was more pressure on the Aussies for me than Canada. But it was 4-0, guys, and it could have been 6, 7. That's how one-sided that game was. And the fighting spirit, it wasn't there. The togetherness, the connectedness, the game plan was certainly off. To Oliver's point, you just need a draw. You're playing wide open. Your team selection. You know that Sinclair can't play 90 minutes. You're playing her from the get-go at the number 9 when she clearly is more successful right now coming off the bench, playing in the second half where the game slows down and gets a little bit more technical. That's where she shines. The decision-making and picking the team. Caitlin Sheridan's words post-game, there's been a lot of focus on a lot of what players had to say, but Caitlin Sheridan saying post-game that I think we let them dictate the game and we just didn't show up. Honestly, we didn't show up. World Cup game where you need a draw to advance from the group. I was, despite us watching, and Adam, you do a great job calling these games in the build-up to the tournament. I think there was some pessimism, but my bar was still relatively high because you are the Olympic champions. You've gone on and won this competition. For me, it's a complete disaster. Just what played out on the field, and something for me, and I think for most people in this country, entirely unexpected.
What's really interesting to me, too, the way the summer has gone. Obviously, Nations League final was a huge disappointment with the Canadian men's national team's A team. We understand the Gold Cup was different, but the expectations were still pretty high. For the 2 senior programs to falter the way they did after the wave of momentum of winning an Olympics and making it to the men's World Cup for the first time in 3 decades, we know all those storylines. It just seems like not only has the program had a misstep, it's put the car in reverse and shot back.
Well,
by a couple of years.
let's not compare what the men did at the World Cup and the women did.
I'm talking about momentum, though, Gareth. I'm not saying that it's apples and apples. It's definitely apples and oranges. They're different things. I'm just saying that, and to that is not that I'm trying to suggest that they're the same thing, but as you bring up with the reaction, this women's national team is almost being coddled by a lot of supporters.
Well,
there's no hate, there's no animosity. I'm not looking
You know
for supporters to be mad at them per se, but they should have the standards that the players keep asking the standards to be at.
Yeah, I mean, look, I respect each and every player that goes and wears the
course.
maple leaf and represents this country. It's just incredibly disappointment. And I think there needs to be more forensic analysis of what actually went wrong here. Like, I've got, and it's fine to go out and be a homer, by the way, and support Canada.
Of course
Like,
it is.
that's what we do. We all want our players, Canadians, our national teams to do well, but we went from like, oh, Canada, oh, baby, to, oh, no, Canada, oh, what the heck am I watching? Like, that's
Not quite as catchy.
We can tighten it up a little bit, but I know where you're going with that.
That's where we were here. It was a complete failure to launch, failure to show up, and just the dichotomy between entering this tournament, we don't get respect. Give us what we deserve. We're a top team. We're a contender. We're one to be reckoned with. These are my words. These are the words of the team and the players to what we saw on the field. And listen, going on to winning the Olympics and doing really well in 3 consecutive Olympics, it's an amazing accomplishment for these players, this program. But at the World Cup, this continues a trend of underachieving and underperforming. 5 consecutive World Cups now. We've gone from not getting out of the group in 2007, finishing last place and picking up no points in the group in 2011. 2015, a home World Cup. They won a knockout round game against Switzerland, the lowest ranked European team at that time. That's it. They lost to aside, I would have considered that side a weaker England side than Canada at that juncture, and you're playing at home. They get out of the group in 2019, but can't beat Sweden in the round of 16, and then fail to get out of the group here. The track record playing at the World Cup, and with all due respect to the Olympics, that's the way that we judge, judge football success, because that's the biggest tournament with the most teams and the best teams in it. And Canada, over the last 5 tournaments, even with Christine Sinclair and her absolute prime, like arguably one of the top 2-3 players in the world over the course of that tenure, have completely underachieved. So what's wrong? Like, what's the reason why? I think every tournament has kind of told a little bit of a different story, but this whole idea of respect at this tournament, you have to go out and earn it. It's fine. Yeah, the Olympics, great. It was an incredible run, but we live in the here and now, and sports forgets quickly. That's the world that we live in this game. And at this tournament, I mean, I don't even know where you guys want to start. Like, from the team selection, from the lack of rotation, the lack of new faces playing in this team when perhaps it needed to be freshened up, to getting the partnerships on the field wrong. Clearly, the way that this team attacks, we always say, well, who's going to score on this team? Well, what's the manager done to provide some more attacking prowess to this team? And if you cannot play that way, then how do you adjust and play a different way? I just saw none of that. Bev Priestman got nothing wrong for me in Tokyo. In this tournament, I think she was out managing each and every game. So what happened?
She won the second half against Ireland, and then she was second best in the other 5 halves.
Or Adam, or Canada just vastly superior to Ireland, a team that's the lowest ranked European team at this World Cup.
But here's, you're right. You're right. Of course they are. They should be considered that. And Ireland's experiencing that for the very first time. Here's my take on it. And obviously we've been going on for a minute. I want to hear from Ollie too. I have not watched Canada play a team outside of, let's call them mid-table CONCACAF, with joy, with bravery, and with desire on the ball in a long time. So when you get a team like Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, who are so much lower than Canada in the FIFA rankings, and we understand the FIFA rankings are flawed. It's rewarding sustained success, but it's still their first tournament. And Katie McCabe was smiling out there. She's just having the time of her life. And I'm waiting for a Canadian player to do that. And let's not pretend like the things off the field haven't weighed on them. But at the end of the day, like, the field is supposed to be their happy place where they can forget all the noise, but everything else going on behind the scenes. I miss seeing a happy, brave, excited Canada, especially in attack. Ollie, that's my rant.
Well, but guys, like, I just don't think the team is good enough. Like, when you say like we should be coming down harder on the team, like who? Because I'm certainly not going to sit here and blame Christine Sinclair. Like, she's carried this program for 20 years, over 20 years. Why is she still the best option at striker at 40 years old? Like, it's not Sinclair's fault that she's still the best that you've got to run out there, right? And I know she didn't have a great game and didn't really impact the game at all in that first half against Australia. But why is there not a better alternative at this point? Like, how long do we need to find someone to finally play adequately at the centre forward position, to succeed Christine Sinclair here? Like, we should not still be relying on her at this stage of her career. And like, I find it hard to come down on Bev Priestman in that sense as well.
You think she is the best option?
I think Sinclair.
Yes.
Right now, yeah, I do. I just haven't seen anything from anyone else to convince me that they're better. The one exception I'll give you, and this is where Canada obviously did have a problem, is Janine Becky was missing. Obviously not a striker, but an attacking player who's very important. And then I think the best striker they have right now is Nichelle Prince, who is a winger, which says it all. And she clearly wasn't fit enough to play a big part in this tournament either. So there's just no real convincing options for me, and that's why I struggle to come down too hard on Bev Priestman here. Like, I think she's undoubtedly, her job is on the line going into those Olympic qualifiers against Jamaica.
Ollie, then I'll ask you, what's changed in less than 2 years? What's changed? Because they have the ability to go out and win those games 2 years ago. What's changed now?
What's changed is I think key players have got older. key players weren't available for this tournament. The teams around them have got better. And I think Bev massively overachieved in winning that Olympic gold medal. I don't think that was a tournament they really had any business winning. And now the shortcomings, she is struggling to patch over. And I don't put that on her. I just don't think the team is good enough.
Well, the team, quite frankly, was saying different things. Correct me if I'm wrong. Heading into this tournament and over the course of the build up to it, they firmly believed that they were good enough. They firmly believed that they were contenders, and so did a lot of other people. So I find that take interesting. I'm not suggesting that you're wrong, and you're right. The rest of the world has caught up to a lot of these teams, but going from Olympic champions to not advancing from the group in a World
Which
Cup
is a
less
World
than
Cup
2
record,
years.
by the way.
And it's happened so quickly. That's dramatic. And Des Scott, Janine Becky, two excellent players, play very specific roles for this team. Well, Janine can play various roles very well, and the goalkeeper's changed. Other than that, all these other players are back. Like the rest of the team is exactly the same.
I think I think it's a failure not to get out of the group, and they have to wear that. There's no question. And like I said off the top, I think the game plan for this Australia game in particular was wrong. I'm not saying that Priestman got everything spot on here. I'm sure there are things she'll look at. But I look back at the 2019 World Cup. I don't think they were much better. There wasn't the humiliating defeat on this level, like this game against Australia, but they weren't good at that tournament either. And they had all of the same problems. So when are we going to start talking about the deeper issues here in terms of the player pool and player development and what kind of profiles of players we just completely don't seem to develop at all, as opposed to just saying, it's this player's fault or this coach's fault. Like it goes deeper for me, and it has been coming for a while.
It's so interesting though, because when it comes to the Olympics, they've been beasts. They've been dominant. How many times have we heard like the Canadian women have carried the Canadian program for all these years? But relatively speaking, in terms of World Cups, the success hasn't come, right? So it's very difficult for me to gauge how good they have been. How good are they? How good were they? Like it's an interesting one because we've seen them great. We've seen them combative. We've seen them difficult to beat. We've seen them pull off the spectacular before. Then we've seen times that, like we've seen in this tournament, maybe not to this level, because the thing that I would always get them by was just the determination, the togetherness, the organization, the mentality. But when you hear Caitlin Sheridan say they didn't show up, well, what's going on? Like that's kind of alarming. It's this is the biggest stage. This is the biggest World Cup ever. And they've set huge expectations for themselves in it. So this is just a massive disappointment. This isn't heartbreak. This is a downright disaster.
I want to talk Christine Sinclair. I want to hear from Christine Sinclair. She is, of course, one of the big storylines from this tournament. The fact that, as Ollie mentioned, she is still somehow Canada's best number 9 at 40 years of age, but also the fact we won't see Christine Sinclair at another World Cup. She's defied time long enough. She hasn't said nothing about going anywhere, but it seems really, really unlikely that a 44-year-old Christine Sinclair will be able to lace up the boots in the next cycle. She picked a blade of grass on the way out, as reported by Claire Hanna, and she took it with her as a memory of, this might be my last World Cup game. Let's hear from the Canadian captain now.
I mean, obviously it's hard knowing that the World Cup's over and just the way it ended. Obviously that's just raw emotion right now, but hopefully looking back on it in time, I mean, created memories. We got young players their first World Cup experience that will go on and lead Canada in the future. But yeah, right now it's a little raw. The reality with the World Cup is all but one team leaves the way we're feeling right now, right? So yeah, for me it's just helping out the youngsters, like helping this fuel them, when they're moving forward, but also the youngsters back home in Canada, our federation, I mean, things have to change. We don't have a professional league. We don't have that pathway for players to reach the national team. And if this isn't a wake-up call, I don't know what is.
So that was the last soundbite that obviously went around the world. It certainly ruffled some feathers here in Canada, and it harkened back to a lot of what we have been discussing. Obviously, there was the press release about the short-term, interim labor deal to at least get through the end of 2023. Their displeasure there being the women's national team, that there was not anything longer to assure what they can expect in the future. But the wake-up call, and Christine Sinclair chooses her words very specifically now. She is as much Canada's striker as she is a politician and an ambassador right now. And that was a pointed comment, Ollie. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I think she's right. I think she also did say that she doesn't blame the federation for their performance at this tournament.
Yes, she did.
And but it's totally fair to point out deeper issues in terms of the where this team is going and the progress that it's made over the past few years, or the fact that it's been caught up by a lot of different programs around the world. So I'm with her. I'm not trying to, when I say this, I'm not trying to let the CSA off the hook. I don't think the way this year has gone has helped. Obviously, March was a disaster and a major missed opportunity in terms of preparing the team at, one of its biggest camp in the lead up to this tournament. But I think it's dangerous, really dangerous, to go down that route of saying that all of these off-field problems and the labor dispute are to blame for this performance, because I think it's a massive misdiagnosis of the problem. And you miss all of the different things that I think Christine was alluding to there about, again, like I said, deeper issues that this program has to confront and solve. And the big one for me, the most obvious one, and she mentioned it there, we need a league and we need professional clubs in this country. And it's great to have these development centers out west and in Ontario and so on, but they can only do so much. You need clubs. You need more opportunities for players. You need a wider net. You need different profiles of players rather than maybe what kind of fits into a development program's preferred kind of, what a potential professional player looks like. You need those opportunities for young Canadian players, and the league is the only solution to that. So that's got to be, for me, priority number 1, 2, 3 coming out of this tournament, particularly when you look at the types of profiles of players we're missing. Again, I think sometimes the weakness of these development programs is that they produce a lot of kind of safe players, very technical players, players who are kind of fundamentally sound, but not necessarily as creative or as daring or have a bit of an edge to them. Again, the solution is clubs. It's clubs that are going to give up more opportunities to more players, and produce a more diverse pool for the national team to draw from. And we've got to get that as soon as possible.
Well, and the Rex and the NDC, it's a stopgap. It's always been a stopgap. But like anything, I think anybody who has played competitive sports at any level or who has kids going through competitive sports can attest to the fact that if you can't get in early, like if you have a delayed growth spurt or you're not in that system from the beginning, you're missed. And when there is no league, there is no infrastructure other than that one place for the uber talented 10-year-olds to go to, it is so difficult to be rediscovered down the path. So that the more clubs, the more infrastructure that exists, only good things can come from it. So I totally agree with you, Ollie. What do you think, Gareth?
Yep. Development. That's as much as there's fighting for dollars at the top, and there's more money in the game than ever for players who are playing at high levels, prominence, whether it's in terms of commercials, sponsorship, playing with your club teams. There's more money in the game now than there's ever been. But for this to be sustainable long-term, it's all about development, our own leagues, a focus on our own players, ditto to all that. In order to be able to execute this, we need more harmony in the game in this country and less divisiveness. People need to come together and work together and take advantage of the increased awareness, visibility, and all of these things. The Canadian Soccer Association, in its own right, needs to grow, needs to be bigger, needs to find new ways to generate revenue, need to become more of a professional organization. There's a lot of work for everyone to do in order to bring this together. You can't do it alone. You can't operate on an island. People need to come together, work together, and make sure that they fully execute based on the limited resources that we have.
There's going to be a lot of time between now and crazy that it's next month now that we will deal with the 2 matches against Jamaica. It'll be an away and home. They have to win the aggregate to advance. Otherwise, not only would they be out of the World Cup in the group stage, but the reigning Olympic champs wouldn't even have a chance to defend their title.
Yeah.
And with that comes on the podium funding and a whole lot. So it will be pressure packed, and that is next for the Canadian women's national team.
I want to be clear though. These problems that we're facing in this country, it's not uniquely a Canadian problem. Look at some of the smaller countries in this tournament. I'll go with Jamaica, or Nigeria is a massive country, but the way that they treat their women's program, it's like,
Appalling.
it's yeah, yeah. Haiti, Morocco, Jamaica, go down the list of like federations in smaller countries where the players have risen to the occasion in this tournament as well. So what these women have been fighting for, I mean, they're not alone in terms of what they're trying to achieve here. I just want to make that clear. Like, this isn't like, oh, it's just Canada Soccer that's struggling with new realities of pay equity, and even more important to that than that, and more potentially debilitating to what you can actually invest, is programmatic equality. $1 goes into one program, $1 goes into the other. That's going to limit both the men's and the women's, what both programs are going to be able to do, because there's more money that's going to be going to both programs at that time. So there's real challenges here. Canada aren't as bad as the majority of countries even playing in this World Cup. I just want to be clear on that, but there are clearly clear and present obstacles that need to be dealt with.